What is up, Fix and the sports chiropractic world? This is Dr. Jay Greenstein here once again. I am super excited for this Facebook Live event because I got my main man, Dr. Ryan Comeau here. Ryan and I met several years ago. He's got a phenomenal company. I'm super excited that he's going to be able to share his story and his technology with you today. Ryan, welcome, my friend.
Hi, Jace. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking
Oh my
forward to
God.
it.
It's a blast. It's a blast. Um, it's so funny. Like there's so much to talk about, but since you are from Canada, I have to ask you a really important question. We're having a very important conversation just before this thing started, like 10 seconds ago, and we're talking about Canadian beer. And I told you what mine was, Moosehead. But now, Ryan, I think the sports chiropractic world needs to know, what is your favorite Canadian beer?
Oh man, that's a good question. There's just so much selection to choose from, really. I'm a pretty big fan of the old school Molson Canadian. I must say,
Nice.
it's but I'm getting into the craft stuff a little bit, and it's kind of cool because we have some pretty good local breweries here. So I like the Molson once in a while. The craft beer is always fun, and try different selections from all around, right? So
Absolutely. Variety is the spice of life, right?
that's right.
All right, so next time we do this, man, we're gonna have some beers in our hands for sure.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like that, Jay. I'm
Awesome,
in.
bro. Cool. So hey, so let's just get right to it because I think it's so important. When Trish and the rest of the Fix team asked me about who I thought would be really relevant and important to talk about, you were one of the first people that came to mind because of what you've done. And we'll get into like your company and Kinetasense and all that great stuff. But if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind just giving the audience a little bit of background of like your history, your experience, how you got into chiropractic, let's just kind of start there.
Absolutely, no, and that's a great question, and that'll really segue into Kinetisense and the company itself, and my story is really comes down to the why behind Kinetisense, and my story kind of exemplifies that a little bit. But I always grew up playing hockey because that's what we do in Canada. So I was really into sports, and my family is very much a medical based family. So my father was, being an MD. I thought that my path was to get into sports medicine, right? Because that's my two passions, medicine and sports.
Sure.
And so I was, I grew up in Red Deer, Alberta, here in Canada, playing hockey, and fast forward, ended up getting a full ride scholarship to play NCAA hockey at the University of Alaska, and
And
so
in Alaska is Go. What's their mascot?
it's the Nanook, so it's actually a polar bear.
Love it. Go Nanooks.
Go
Cool.
Nanooks! So I went to University of Alaska, and I was doing my undergraduate in biology and preparing for med school, hopefully, and it was crazy because it was about halfway through my first year of playing hockey up there that I ended up sustaining a really bad injury to my knee, and it was a non-contact injury. It just kind of happened sporadically, so that really affected me and my ability to play. So from there on, I finally got back in the lineup, and about 2 weeks later, all of a sudden my ankle was injured, right? And then my hip, and everything was happening on that same side of my body, and it was injury after injury, and it was incredibly frustrating because I was unable to play, and so I was being seen by the sports med practitioners of the team, and everyone's trying to work on this, and I'm trying to get back on the ice. And it wasn't until our trainer told me to go see the team chiropractor that I gave that a go, right? And it was the first time I'd ever seen a chiropractor in my life. And this practitioner, he's like, you know what? There's something biomechanically going on here, right? There's something that's causing you to compensate. There's something that's causing these injuries to occur, these joints to start to take on this stress or this strain. And so he started to do functional movement assessments on me. He started to look at how I move globally, right? How the full body moves. And it was amazing because I was back on the ice in about 2 weeks' time when I was
Phenomenal.
told by so many other practitioners before him that it would be 2, 3, 4 months. And so that really changed my world. It rocked my world because, I realized that chiropractic really was the sports medicine that I was always dreaming to be part of. And finally, someone assessing me from a global perspective, getting to the root of the problem, and not just assessing me from a joint by joint perspective, right?
Yeah.
So from there, I went to LA for chiropractic school at SCUHS, and had an incredible experience there, and had the chance to spend about a year under Dr. Craig Liebenson.
I never heard of that guy before. Who is he?
Yeah, I know. He's not that well known.
No, I don't know anybody who knows him.
Yeah, I always joke, I tell Dr. Liebenson, I'm like, man, you wrote the Bible on functional rehab, right? And which he did.
Yeah.
So I really started to gain an understanding of rehabilitation, movements, movement assessments, different things like that, and how powerful that can be as a clinician. And how we got to take into account the fascia, the nervous system, the proprioceptive system, the brain, right?
Oh yeah.
Into how we assess and how we move. And but I did feel, and it was around my last year of chiropractic school and biomechanics lectures, the advanced biomechanic lectures, pulling out the goniometer and inclinometer and these handheld tools. And my professor telling me that we simply have to really eyeball assessment. It's like, how we have all these incredible advances in science, and how come we have to rely as practitioners on simply eyeballing assessments? It lacks objectivity, and we have to rely on subjective means and accuracy.
Yeah.
And Jay, you know as well as I do, you're going to assess someone in your clinic, and even if I did the same protocol of assessment, I'm going to assess them differently or come up with something different. Yep. And so I felt that was a huge gap in our profession, and I feel that just as we have Holter monitors for assessing the heart, right? If you're a cardiologist or what have you, we as practitioners have to have a tool that's consistent, reliable, and objective, almost like our own little mini biomechanics lab, so to speak.
Yep.
That's portable in our clinics, because that's how we can show change. That's how we can prove change. That's how we can validate ourselves as practitioners, as clinicians. But also, we need to really start to look at how can we validate chiropractic. And that's really the driver behind my vision, my mission, and the vision and mission of Kinetasense. And it's to put chiropractic at the forefront of neuromusculoskeletal assessment and rehab in a place that we should be. And I think that this is the missing piece, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, listen, I'll never forget. I was at Parker, and I walked over, just walking through the booth, schmoozing with friends or whatever. And I walk over and I'm looking at the thing. I'm like, man, what is this? This is so freaking cool. So I made a point to go to your class. I don't know if you remember, I was sitting in front and I was just enthralled. I was like, holy crap, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. When it comes to biomechanical analysis, like this was the functional analysis. Like to me, this was like this holy grail. And so, I came up to you afterwards and we started chatting, and, we kind of hit it off, and that was, that was kind of the beginning of us getting to know each other. But it's just incredible what you've built. And I think it's important for the audience, because a lot of people are meeting you for the first time. Just quickly, I don't want to be a commercial, but just tell people what Kinetasense is, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, what Kinetasense is it's a software. It's a module-based software. So depending on which module you select within the software, you can analyze anything from 3D posture, so three-dimensional posture, to gait analysis, to balance, range of motion of joints. And what we do is we use a 3D sensor. So the 3D sensor allows us to be able to pick up the body without having to put wearables on, right? So in a clinical setting, this is huge. Like we do not have time in our day-to-day to be putting on reflective sensors, right?
Yeah, totally.
So the patient, the sensor is attached to the computer. You fire up Kinetasense, the patient gets in front of the sensor, and automatically their joints will light up right in front of your eyes and right in front of their eyes as well too. And then you simply select the module you want to do and you take them through. Now, the cool thing is it doesn't just spit out a bunch of XYZ data. We actually have computer learning and artificial intelligence that spits out advanced outputs to you and actually scores the patient. So they're always scored from 0 to 100, right? And then that allows us to look at trend data and be able to analyze changes, pre-adjustment, post-adjustment, and in all three planes. And that's the really important thing. We actually show a representation of the transverse plane, that overhead view. Mm-hmm. Because we have the ability to analyze depth perception with the sensor. So we can show the overhead view, the frontal view, the sagittal view, all with one camera. And that's the thing that, I think that we're so limited when we're doing this visually or just with a two-dimensional assessment. If you're missing the transverse plane, you're really only getting 60% of the data or information. And with the research and the data that we're collecting, that transverse plane, that overhead view and the rotations, that's where a lot of compensations occur. You think about posture, for instance.
Yeah.
And so, just on the posture module, the power of having a patient come in, you take a quick snapshot and it's just like that. It's start and stop, done. You got all the data. You then go and you do your chiropractic adjustment. As they're walking out, you take another snapshot and you can show them how you centralize. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And the patient's like, wow, finally a practitioner that shows me why I feel better after my chiropractic adjustment.
100%, man. And showing people is so much more powerful than telling them, right? Like
100%.
They need to see it, they feel it, but if they see it for themselves, they know the intervention has had a significant and positive impact on their condition and on their overall health. What's really cool about what you did, because when we first started talking and we talked about implementing in our practice, because I wanted this equipment, but I wanted to understand the reliability of the data, right? Is it valid? Is it actually correct information? You went to great lengths in order to ensure that this was university research level data. And maybe just, if you could just tell the sports chiros that are out there, because they probably think a lot like we do, like, hey, before I use something, I got to know that it actually is measuring and reporting what it's supposed to be measuring and reporting. So you compared it against the gold standard, correct?
Yeah. So I mean, we knew that being in the clinical realm, we had to have a system that was incredibly accurate, right? I mean, we talk about like med legal cases and these things that as clinicians, we have to provide information, data, SOAP notes, and so on and so forth. So we knew that we had to be very, very accurate, and so we dedicated about 4 to 5 years time of trying to develop what we call our Kinetasense motion engine, right? So this is actually a layer that sits on top of the data that comes in from the sensor, and we're able to scrub out outlier data that the cameras sometimes produce to create inaccuracies, right? So we're able to take that out in real time, and we knew we had to validate. We knew that this product would require a level of validation to hold up in the courts for MVA or med legal cases. So we actually went to 2 different universities and we did a comparison study, and we compared it to the accuracy of the Vicon system. So for the people listening in who don't know what the Vicon system is, it's basically, and you've probably seen the commercials with the sports video gaming, right? You see those athletes wearing, the black suits with reflective markers. That's a Vicon system, and those systems are very expensive, and upwards to $1 million. And then you have to have the whole setup, and it takes about 20-30 minutes to calibrate. You got to put the suit on. But we get really good movement data, and that's the system that we see when we're looking at analyzing things like neuromuscular disorders and things like that in a lab setting. And really only the universities have these, or sometimes the professional sports teams do, because they have the resources.
Right.
So we compared our system, which is much less expensive and portable, and a single camera markerless system, to that. And we were found to have similar accuracy to the Vicon system.
That's
And two
remarkable.
different. So that was a huge check mark for us.
Yeah, that's remarkable. It provides so much credibility for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
As it relates to maybe your favorite athlete story, either in practice and or using Kinetasense, like what's one of the most remarkable stories that you have that you could share with other sports chiropractors that are watching today, where they could learn from that experience?
Yeah, one of the areas that because I'm still a clinician, just like you, Jay, too. So the cool thing is I get to use this technology almost every single day uh, in clinic. I'm very passionate about concussion, and it's because I've had quite a few in my career, and they were mismanaged, right? And obviously now the management of it's better. There's more information on it, but we're still relying on really subjective ways of baselining and reassessing. And so one of my favorite applications is to baseline the young athletes. We use our balance module for that,
Mhm.
and we kind of had a really cool story where we had a young athlete that had a pretty severe concussion, and unfortunately he went back and back to play too quickly, and sustained a second concussion, and it really affected him.
Mm.
It affected him to the point where his photosensitivity, loud noises, and we're talking even a year and a half out, were really having a huge impact on his life, and he couldn't concentrate in school. His the parents would say that his whole demeanor was so much different than it was previous, and he couldn't play the sports he loved to play. So we were able to use our system to show where his issues were with balance. And because our system will actually map out the body and tell you which joints, for balance, for instance, are lacking that's proprioceptive stability, we were able to customize a rehab program for him and basically start to get joints moving in certain planes that would fire the brain, right?
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
did a bunch of other things too, from a neurological perspective, but we started to be able, and although it was a slow process, we were starting to see some momentum. And we all have these cases where we have slow improvement, right? Whether it's chronic cases, and a lot of times, unless we have a tool that shows the patient that they're improving, they fall off.
Oh, yes.
Compliance is a massive part of our practice, and it affects our outcomes, right? So
100%.
with the tool and being able to reassess his balance and reassess functional movement, every 2 to 3 sessions we would do this. We were able to show a steady, slow improvement, which meant as a practitioner, I knew that we were on the right track because I had something to validate what I was doing. And I wasn't jumping around from treatment to treatment. I knew I was going to stick with our protocol. The parents of this child were blown away that they could see this. And the child had this sense of, hey, you know what? I'm going to work on my home care. I'm
Yeah.
going to continue with the process because I see that this is improving. Even though I still have symptoms, I'm seeing that functionally I'm improving. And it was about a week and a half ago we were able, with the medical team we were working with, we were able to return him to play.
Oh my God,
He,
that's awesome.
he's back to normal again,
That's
and
so awesome.
it was about a 2 to 3 month process of rehabbing this. But when you have the parents coming into your clinic in tears, that's why we do what we do, and it made a big difference. And I don't think we would have had the same outcome without that level of output from the system. I
Yeah.
just really don't.
I love that story. There's a couple things that come to mind. You talk about the impact on the child when they can't continue to participate in a sport. We know from the data that 1 out of every 3 kids by the time they hit high school has stopped playing a sport because of an injury. And
Yeah.
the theme for me as I'm listening to you, Ryan, is like you you became a chiropractor because of, we'll call it mismanagement. Maybe that's a little strong, but we'll call it
Mhm.
mismanagement. And then you not only became a chiropractor, but then you have created technology to overcome mismanagement. And I just think that's remarkable. And I think the impact of that, I think we're going to see it for decades to come. Which is why, like I love what you've built, and which is why we've adopted what you've built. So I'm super excited about the work that you're doing. When it comes to sports chiropractic and the
Mhm.
use of technology, what do you think the future holds? What do the sports chiropractors have to look forward as it relates to the future?
Yeah, and great question. I think as practitioners, and I think as sports chiropractors, as we term ourselves, we concentrate so much on the rehab aspect, right? So our clinics are very much based on the injury occurring, and trying to rehab, right? Trying to get that athlete back to play, but also at an optimal level. But it's really cool with the system, and one of the modules that comes to mind is the single leg hop test, which is a module because we were like, you know what, we want to start to be able to collect data on movement that perhaps would give us insights to if there's susceptible to an injury. Imagine that, right? So imagine that you could catch susceptibility to a non-contact ACL injury.
Yep.
We
Life
all
change.
know for chiropractors how devastating an ACL tear can be,
Yep.
or the terrible triad, right? And it's quite common. Like, and these young athletes are oftentimes, they're out of the game for 6 months to a year, sometimes more. Sometimes they never go back after sustaining an injury like that, right? So the single leg hop test gives us insight as to what is the risk left leg versus right leg for something like for non-contact ACL injury, and then being able to then rehab or prehab, I
Rehab.
guess,
Right. Right. Right.
is the proper term, being able to strengthen them and get them to a point where they're no longer at risk. I think that that's where sports chiropractic, with this level of assessment and data, is going. It's going to be about preventing injury. We're going to build practices that are just solely based on baselining and trying to from a whole body perspective, a global perspective, trying to get that athlete in an optimal position for performance, but also the reduction of injury and prevention of injury.
Yeah.
The other cool thing is that, with our system, we're starting to see some really interesting trends in different age groups and different types of athletes that play different sports, and that have never been discussed before, right? That we're going to be able to share with our chiropractors that are using the system and give them insights to some of these findings, and be able to proactively, change the way that athlete moves, reduce the risk of injury, and optimize obviously their performance. So I think that's where the future is going. I think the clinics are going to have to become data driven. I think we have to really rely on objectivity, and that has to be the driving force that our clinics are built around, is objective data. That's the future, and I think that the practitioners that don't do that are going to fall behind, right?
No question.
They really do.
Yeah, no question. And first of all, if you look at the World Federation of Chiropractic's definition of our profession, prevention is part of our definition. So it really
Yeah.
needs to be not just maintenance care, which we know has good evidence, but it needs to be other areas where we can prevent injuries from occurring as well. I also love what you said about the data. And I think where the future is also going is the ability to leverage data science, to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to make even better sense of that data. So as clinicians, we can make even better decisions. And I know that you've already got some of that built into your system. So you're like, dude, you're like ahead of the curve, my friend. You're the tip of the bullet, which is just amazing to see. So before we get off, I just want everybody to know how to get in touch with you. So you share your website, your email. How can people best get in touch with you? Your Twitter
Yeah.
handle, your phone number, your address, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can learn more about Kinetasense. It's www.kinetasense. That's KINETISENSE.com. We also have a Kinetasense Facebook page with a ton of information on there as well too. You can email me, Ryan@kinetasense.com, if you have any questions. And yeah, look forward to meeting some of you. It's a very exciting space, and we're very passionate about it. So we'd love to talk with you.
Absolutely. And one last question for you, my friend, before we
Yeah.
hop off. What's your plan for Christmas, bro?
Oh, we're taking it easy this Christmas. I have two little girls, and we bought them a Barbie playhouse. So we're going to be. I'll probably be playing Ken doll actually most of my Christmas break. So really looking forward to that.
There you go, man. That's awesome. So Papa daughter time. I
That's
love it,
right.
bro.
That's
I love
right.
it. Well, listen, man.
Hashtag dad, yeah, girl dad, right? Yeah.
There you
So
go. I love it.
yeah,
Well, listen, have a healthy, happy holiday season. Great to catch up with you, and I'll talk to you soon, brother.
sounds good, Jay. Love you, man.